Hi, this is Scott Arnaud, here today to talk about some security awareness basics. Today we're going to cover social engineering. Attackers can use human nature to basically trick their target into giving up valuable information or access to a restricted area. Most people want to be helpful and responsive. Attackers know this. Just because information doesn't seem especially sensitive in context doesn't mean an attacker can't use it elsewhere. For example, if your staff or a colleague tells a caller that you're at a conference in Chicago this week, that caller may then contact you next week to, quote, follow up on the conversation at that conference. And of course, this is going to make this person seem legit because, well, you're at the conference and, oh, I guess that must have been one of the 50 people I talked to. Now, this type of attack is called social engineering, and it comes in a number of different flavors. These are scams and attacks that you, your colleagues, and anyone you know can encounter on any given day. Attackers also commonly target senior personnel, which is a separate concept called whaling, but obviously pretty well related. Now, this can come via email, which is basically referred to as phishing. There's also spear phishing and BEC scams, which we cover separately in another section on security awareness, so definitely check that out. That video will be posted as well as this one. And they can also come via phone calls. This is something called vishing, which is basically voice-oriented phishing. It can also be smishing, which is short message service, which is the proper name for text messaging, so it's a text message trick. And these phone calls can also include things like tech support calls. This is where someone calls you allegedly from, say, Microsoft to tell you there's something wrong with your computer. Microsoft doesn't make these phone calls. So when you see something like this, the assumption is it's fake until you see a reason it's not. One organization that gets targeted quite a bit is the help desk. The help desk is a major target because their personnel have a lot of information at their fingertips, and they're typically under pressure to resolve as many tickets as possible in as little time. Now, one thing that's also a problem which can hit employees anywhere, help desk or any place, is something called baiting. Now, baiting is basically when a bad guy leaves something that looks tempting so that you're going to take it like bait and plug it into your system. A good example of this happened actually in the James Bond movie Skyfall, in which at one point Bond winds up getting the villain's laptop. He brings it back and Q, inexplicably, plugs it into MI6's system and it immediately infects it with malicious software, malware. Now, what you might see would be something like a USB stick drive or CD or something like that labeled Senior Executive Compensation in the Current Year. And they'll just happen to be lying around in a parking lot or a common area or something like that. Look, we're all curious, and you see something like that, well, let me see what that is. You plug it into your system and boom, it attacks. It's human nature. Attackers will take advantage of that. There's also in-person variants. One of the first ones you'll see is something called pretexting. Pretexting is when someone who doesn't belong someplace pretends to be someone who does. Might be something like a fire inspector who's not really a fire inspector. Another movie example for this one would be Beverly Hills Cop. There's a scene in a bonded customs warehouse area where Eddie Murphy's character gets caught in there and he immediately whips out his Detroit police badge, starts flashing it around like he's a customs agent, and they buy it. The thing is, he doesn't belong there, and he's using pretexting to get into a place he doesn't belong. Very funny in context, not so funny when it happens to you. Another concept is something called tailgating, and that's when someone basically, let's say you're at a spot where you have to tag in with your card, or maybe it's a turnstile, and someone actually lets you slide in with them because they're being courteous. Thing is, you got to realize when an attacker's in a situation like that, they don't want to stand out. They'll look like someone who belongs there. Something like this actually happened to me not so long ago. I was coming to a hospital and my hands were full and I didn't know the way in. I wound up going to an employee entrance by accident. One of the employees let me in to be polite. Now it turns out I'm usually at least not that much of a problem, but what if I'd been someone trying to break in and steal information from the hospital? Boom, gets right in. This is something you have to watch out for. Some of these attacks can also be web-based. This can be something like a fake LinkedIn connection, which is using that connection to glean professional information for use in a future attack of a different kind. Maybe it's something where they're trying to sneak in and they're getting all the information to make that later attack look convincing. It can also be something like a romance scam. That can be using something like Ashley Madison or OkCupid or one of the other sites, and that can lead to blackmail. This could be something like illicit affair, sexting, you name it, and it can be used against employees. Someone doesn't want something coming out, they might be very cooperative for a different type of attack. Now, one thing to realize with all of these things, they tend to be dynamic. What I mean by that is that they're always changing. The biggest risk that we run across is that we assume that we can spot them. You probably can spot attacks you've heard about some of the time. Problem is sometimes you won't, and sometimes the attacks will be completely different. If it comes out of left field and you don't know what you're looking for, it can trick you. So what can you do to avoid falling for one of these scams? Always assume that a call, email, etc. is fake until you're given a convincing reason to think otherwise, especially if it comes from someone you don't already have a connection with. And even if it does come from somebody you have a connection with, if there's no reason to send it to you, feel free to contact them. Don't hesitate to pick up the phone. Do it separately. Don't do it with what's in the email. Because at the end of the day, even if it's coming from someone you know, it might just appear that way. There's a way to fake emails called spoofing, in which the address given is not the real address of the sender. It's who they want you to think it is. And of course, anytime you have any sorts of issues, don't hesitate to call your security personnel, your IT department, or a supervisor. And one thing that's related to this is obviously a basic security awareness little presentation, a short one at that. You want to have security awareness training keyed to your organization. Your employees should know how to recognize suspicious communications in context, how to identify people who should not be in your office space, as well as what steps to take in response. What information should or shouldn't be given to a caller coming into your organization. And how might your help desk actually contact them, and what information might they ask for properly, as well as what they won't ask for. Help desk employees in particular should know how to verify employee identities before giving out passwords or other information in accordance with your organization's rules. And also how to respond when someone tries to circumvent the proper procedures, and also train employees and executives in what to expect so they don't get frustrated when dealing with the help desk. This may sound annoying or minor. It can be critical because this is exactly what social engineering attackers use to get information and access they're not supposed to have. It's important to have secure, repeatable procedures in these cases, and the security awareness training that's tailored to your organization will make sure everyone knows those procedures and is consistent with them. And of course, if you've actually been victimized or even suspect you might, don't hesitate to contact law enforcement if your firm has been hit. Start with the FBI and Secret Service, and you can go from there. Once again, my name is Scott Arnaud, and if you have questions about this or other areas relating in security, feel free to contact me. You can find me on LinkedIn or contact me directly at scott@thesecurityadvocate.com. Thank you, and stay safe.